Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm TRACY Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Have you ever heard about someone getting named in a lawsuit and it's made you think again about your malpractice coverage? Or maybe you had some misunderstanding with your administrative team and realized that they didn't understand what you were doing clinically at all? If that is you, it may be time to take a good look at your medical malpractice coverage and make sure that you, in fact, have all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Joining us on the show today is Will Sullivan of CMF Group. They are the largest national provider of malpractice for PAs and nurse practitioners, here to tell us all about coverage and making sure that you yourself are covered. Here we go. William, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, TRACY. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Could you take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners, tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Will Sullivan. I'm the Executive Vice President of CMF Group, one of the principals. And what I do is I help run an insurance operation, CMF Group. And what we do is we serve clients in the healthcare field, specifically for medical malpractice. And a big part of that over the years has been PAs like yourself.
And I love talking about this because I think it's one of these topics that no one really wants to think about getting sued or being named in a suit or using malpractice, right? We want to be covered. We just don't want to think about why we would ever need coverage or the things that can happen, because as a clinician, that's so stressful. Like, I can remember a preceptor telling me as a student, it's not if you get sued, it's when. And as a student, I was like, what? Like, everyone? And that was terrifying to me at the time. So talk a little bit more about, I don't know if you have any statistics or reasons why this is something that every clinician who's practicing medicine needs to be aware of.
Sure. So, PAs are a bit different. You're going to be pulled into lawsuits typically if you're in a large scale employer like a health system where a couple dozen people have worked with a patient over a certain period of time of incidence and treatment. So you could have all the nurses, all the nurse practitioners, the PAs, the doctors, the surgical tech, everybody, the health system gets sued all in one fell swoop. So in that instance, what your preceptor said is absolutely correct. The statistics on how many PAs are actually getting sued, I would say it's not everybody is, individually getting sued typically. When you look at other professional types, like a dentist, typically they get at least one lawsuit like in a career. Physicians, very much more consistent because they're usually like considered in the purview traditionally like the primary caretaker, over the years as the provider. I think the landscape shift that's happening for PAs with the modernization is that the access to care needs is that PAs are modernizing their license capability and they're getting a lot more public exposure, like the Harris poll that the AAPA worked on. A lot of people rely upon and love working with PAs, which is wonderful. But on the alternative side, I think when people start getting hurt, they're not going to just be thinking about the hospital and a doctor per se, but they're going to be thinking about more of like the care team in essence. And I think that's where PAs kind of start falling into the area of becoming a target is what's going to happen, I think, the next 5 to 10 years, much, much more consistently.
Yeah. Another really pervasive myth that I think I probably believed until I was out and practicing was that as a PA, I was less liable. And that's not true at all. Like that's just, it's not how it is. Like I am still prescribing, diagnosing, treating, practicing at the top of my license, and all of those things, every decision that you make when it comes to care and those choices are potential liabilities. Like, I mean, I hope that we're all practicing evidence-based medicine. I hope that we're being careful and communicating clearly with our patients. But every time you come in contact with a patient is a potential that you could end up in one of these situations, which if you think about how many patients we treat in a day or a week or a month or over the course of your career, can feel very overwhelming as a clinician.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, for sure. It's true. The way our legal system works, in the US is in essence, as a professional, you have a higher standard of whatever you're doing. So the treatment, the care that you're doing is not like myself as somebody in the insurance realm. It's as a healthcare provider who should know, as a PA, certain types of evidence-based care, what you're supposed to do in protocols of an emergency, things of that nature that a layperson wouldn't know. So the standard of a professional is higher in the care that you have to provide and what processes you follow. And that's part of, really like public safety. But what that provides is also personal liability too. So you're liable for the actions that you take, whether you're by extension working with a physician or if you're, kind of leading the charge in the ER at in a hospital system. If you're the one interacting with a patient, you could be held liable for the interaction, good or bad, with the diagnosis, the treatment, the prescriptions. So, that's kind of how the U.S. health system works, and just the legal system works. And what, again, like I said, is the more consistently that we build up more and more states with the modernization for the PAs, the more likelihood that they're going to be seen on the front lines in that interaction with patients and kind of like on an island upon themselves in that treatment versus an extension of a care team like it's historically been built out. And I think that's really realistic. The other thing when you think about, that concern, again, going back to your preceptor, is, the lawsuit severity is what we see as like major issues. And not a lot of people kind of know this, but so CMF Group kind of entered into working with PAs, decades and decades ago in the 80s and 90s. But we started working with the AAPA specifically because the insurance company that worked with the PAs fell into really like a tough time with another med mal crisis. That means the severity and the frequency of the losses, the claims that were occurring in healthcare were so high that companies start backing out the med mal market because it's considered in the insurance realm that one of the more highly volatile areas of industry and insurance. And the largest carrier, insurance company that worked with the APA and a lot of PAs primarily, actually went insolvent in the late 90s. So that turned into, okay, what's a market that we can actually provide to the membership of the APA, but then also PAs at large. And that's kind of where we got entered into the scenario to provide really a market for PAs that we've been able to sustain since the late 90s in true partnership with PAs. And that's, the severity, as in like the size of the claims, can be so enormous. This past year, we saw, I believe, the largest med mal claim was against a PA over $400 million in, I believe, New Mexico, and it's sizable on these things. So there is a real risk of these things happening.
Yeah. And those numbers feel really scary as a provider and as a person. Like when you think about those numbers relative to personal finance or relative to like, that's not something that you can like raise the deductible on your car insurance and like cover it, right? This is huge numbers, major claims. So as we're thinking about that, as a newer clinician, I definitely placed more trust in my employer. And I just sort of blindly said, I'm sure an organization this size has my best interest at heart. I'm sure that they have me covered. And that was often part of, the contract and the compensation, knowing that they would cover the malpractice. But I didn't necessarily know how much or how, like what type of policy, what type of coverage. So if someone is listening and they have just been sort of putting blind faith in their employer, what do they need to find out or investigate or know about their own employer fostered coverage?
Sure. Yeah. So, and that's a good point, like employer foster coverage. So, because there's going to be different iterations of where you are in your career path and what you're doing as an employee W-2, where you kind of fall under the umbrella of the employer per se. That's typically how that goes. Or if you're on an island kind of saying, hey, I want to start doing Botox, this is the example we start seeing, or virtual mental health care. But you find like a side hustle where you want to build some expertise. So you kind of do something on the side as a 1099. But on the employer side, typically what we recommend is that you just go to the office administrator or even your risk management director of that health system and you just say, hey, just for my own records, I personally just need to get proof of coverage and that I am specifically covered. And I just need to see that. I've talked to my personal finance person or my personal attorney who's doing my estate planning, and we just need to see that proof of coverage. And so, why do you do that? Number one is you just want to know, you want to confirm you're covered, because we have seen even doctors' offices that say you're covered. And then we get people come to us and say they have general liability, which is like slips and falls. So it's not even med mal. So we've seen larger successful business entities come in with that and not even have the med mal in place. State of Florida does not specifically require med mal for physicians. So if you work in the state of Florida, for example, your doctors might, in a small practice, might not even want to pay the money for the med mal. So now you're working for that employer in that state, in particular, as an example, which we've run into this, where there's a lawsuit that occurs. The doctors they're supposed to retain a certain amount of money and assets to pay for claims for public. But the doctor didn't have coverage in place, and one of our clients did. So we got hit with the bulk of that claim, even though it was really like a twofold, because, who has the money to pay for it? So you want to get confirmation of the coverage. And you do that because the business entity has a fiduciary duty, like a health system. The hospital has a fiduciary duty to maintain the hospital for the benefit of the community, right? Like that's the whole basis of it, and not-for-profit status if they are not-for-profit. So no matter what happens in a lawsuit, they've got to keep the hospital afloat, no matter what. I mean, of course, they want to maintain employment with you as their W-2, and the culture is, let's just say the culture is, good and on the right side for all providers, but that's not really reality. And sometimes there's just difficulties that happen. But if you're working for an employer and you do something, they might say, hey, that's outside of the standard of care and our process that we have in standard operating protocol in the system. And you were doing outside the lines. So maybe the coverage doesn't kind of include you now. So the hospital might be protected, but they might kind of like carve you out, so to speak, in a defense. And if that happens, well, then it's just you and your personal assets between you and a catastrophic loss. Whereas if you had a personal insurance policy, you would be able to trigger a defense with your malpractice carrier right away. And then if the hospital takes it and runs with it and defends you, that's fine. But you still have a policy there for somebody who's just advocating for you specifically if you need it. And then paying the loss too, if there is a claim. So that's one of the reasons why we suggest, like in the employer-based realm, it's super, super meaningful to have it, especially if there's a license issue. Sometimes employers' coverages won't extend licensure coverage for you, whereas your personal policy, CMF, all of our like friends in the industry all provide that. So it's super meaningful. And like a licensure defense can be, pro se is never a good idea, but it could be $8,000 to $10,000 to defend your license, and that's your biggest asset as a healthcare provider.
Have you ever wondered if your malpractice policy is providing you with enough coverage? Turns out that employers' policies protect their interests and not necessarily yours. CM&F Group offers personal liability protection that adapts to your growing, changing responsibilities, including state compacts and allowing for protection for practicing medicine across state lines. From telemedicine to license and HIPAA defense, if it's something that you need protection for, CM&F has you covered. PA students can even enjoy a completely free student policy from your first day as a student until you become a licensed PAC. In a climate where we are hyper aware of charting wording, covering ourselves, and constantly worried about practicing defensive medicine, you can't leave your liability coverage up to chance. Enjoy the peace of mind, exceptional customer service, and find the best comprehensive coverage that fits your practice at www.cmfgroup.com/thepaisin or click the link in the show notes. And is that something that if and when you get a personal medical malpractice policy, that it's portable? Like I'm working in general surgery and then I get a new job working in urology and then I switch to plastic surgery. Do I have the same policy that continues in all of those different roles?
Sure. Most companies like to keep it portable. We do at CMF Group. The only thing that kind of adjusts depending upon where you work could be just the cost of it. So that's typically what happens. I mean, table stakes, it's usually for us and some of our friends or competitors, so to speak, we all kind of maintain a similar methodology of, hey, we try to give you as robust a policy where you can kind of adjust because it's just impossible to be constantly in touch about changes in your practice, especially PAs that are so dynamic. You know, you're trained to know a lot to be able to kind of shift here and there. So that's one side. But on the other side, there are some companies, and you know, I won't name them, but they will have specific restrictions on the policy that exclude certain items. So you might get yourself into doing work that you discover it excludes that, you know, and you wouldn't want to know that after the fact, because if you're already doing that, you want to make that adjustment ahead of time. So it's always good to kind of ask if you're doing like a large scale change in your practice. Usually want to shoot a note to the insurance company and just ask them like, hey, I'm going from A to B. You know, does this matter? I was doing Botox, but now I'm doing dermal fillers. Does that matter? I'm doing mental health care. I used to do brick and mortar, but with the compact, I now am handling some people that moved out of my region to another state, and I want to do virtual care. Is that covered? You know, so you want to just, those are pretty simple questions. So, I mean, for us, it's you're covered either way in those scenarios.
Yeah, and it's good to know what your coverage is and if there are specific exclusions. When someone applies and is like looking for a policy, are you taking into account years of experience, specialty, region? Like, what are the things that are going to determine those premiums for the provider?
Yeah, good question. So it's clearly like the professional type. So your PA, you work in the state of Illinois. Okay, so there's going to be, you know, for most companies, usually a distinction between Cook County around Chicago because it's a highly dense urban area. There's a lot more litigation versus maybe like Springfield, close to like the state capital, which is more on the countryside, might be a lower cost, right? Or DuPage County outside Chicago. So that's like one area from like a geographic region. And that changes state to state, some areas county to county. That's one part. The next piece of it is typically, okay, are you employed or self-employed? And so the reason why that matters is that initial scenario is there's an umbrella of an employer policy that kind of defrays the risk because now you have like two policies, you as the employee and then the employer, right? If you're 1099, you're in essence, from a legal standpoint, you lose the piece of agency, as they call it, and you're kind of an island upon yourself from a liability risk standpoint. So you kind of go into becoming that like one stood up policy that you have to defend. So that will adjust. So self-employed 1099 typically will be higher than a W-2 policy because you're kind of taking the full weight of the risk. So those are the things there. The next two things I would say is really like your specialty focus. You know, if you're doing cardiothoracic surgery, which is like considered highly risky compared to maybe, dermatology, non-invasive dermatology, that's going to be a distinction in cost. And just because the risk of something going bad might be more prevalent based on med mal statistics over the years. The last, I guess, like another two is just usually when you're in the beginning of your career, the expectation is that you've learned all like the newest things. So you kind of know a lot, but you're also not leaned on as much as maybe the veterans are. So you kind of have your preceptor and stuff like that. So there's a period of time that usually you can get a reduction in rate cost until, you get to 5 to 10 years. You start to see more claims with people typically, closer to the 10-year mark and post, not in the early years so much. So that's part of it. And then the last thing about costs is just there's two different insurance policy coverages. This is like, I think this is probably, Tracy, like the biggest question, like claims made and then like occurrence. Yeah, which is like always like the big question. And then people call it tail coverage. There actually isn't really like a thing called tail coverage, just what everybody calls it, the nomenclature. But so like claims made typically will be like a quarter, 23% of the full cost of an occurrence policy. And then what happens is it steps up in claim steps until it's the same cost of an occurrence policy. So the best way to kind of explain in a claims made policy, you have to buy tail or an extended reporting period if you want to report claims indefinitely or after your coverage ends. Occurrence, in essence, builds in the tail. So it's a higher cost at the front end, but it's like level for years. So how do you understand the difference between the two? I use the 1 day example as the easiest thing. If you, Tracy, got coverage today and tomorrow you canceled, okay? So an occurrence policy, you have coverage for 1 day, you cancel it the next day, you just get a refund of whatever prorated amount, in essence, of your cost of your policy. With us, you can now report a claim of an incident that happened today indefinitely. Nothing else. We just refund you the money, you cancel it, we send you a cancellation endorsement, all your paperwork, you're done. Claims made is different because you need an extended reporting period endorsement. And that's why the cost is lower, because it kind of does it year by year and stacks and increases. So if you got coverage today, you cancel tomorrow, you only get coverage for today if you buy the tail, is what they call the tail of the policy. And that can sometimes be 2-3x of whatever you paid for the first year claims made. So it's sometimes almost 70% of all of our clients across all specialties, not even PAs, are in an occurrence product. Most of our competitors in all of med mal like claims made. There's different rationales for that, but part of it is usually people end the policy and they don't want to pay the extra money for the tail, which means the carrier is officially off the risk. So that means whatever you paid for, it goes away. Like a good example that people, I saw a gentleman post this, and it's just a great analogy. Insurance, people expect you pay a lot of money and it does something for you. Well, what it does for you, it's a safety valve when you need it. It's like, and I have a fire extinguisher in my kitchen and in each of my cars, actually. I only use it when I need it. But that doesn't mean paying for the fire extinguisher was like a waste of money. I also have to replace mine now because it's getting like low and they only last so long. But you pay for it for in the emergency you use it. But that, yeah, you lose the money, but you had the peace of mind of it over the year. So that's like another distinction. People feel like I never had any claims. You should just like give me money back. And that's somebody could report a claim in 3 years for it.
Are you confident you know where your next dollar should go? 403B, 457, HSA, or Roth? There are so many options. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming. A lot of providers aren't sure if their investment mix is optimized, if they're contributing enough to their investment accounts, or if they're paying too much in taxes. Meet Caleb Pepperday, a fee-only financial planner and founder of Advanced Practice Planning, LLC. Caleb helps PAs create a clear plan of action that allows them to fast track their path to work optional living, all while keeping more of what they earn today. Caleb's process identifies the strategies that make the most sense for each PA situation and provides step-by-step guidance to put them into action. For our listeners, Caleb is offering a free one-on-one consultation where he will provide feedback on the steps you've taken in your own financial situation and if you're on track to achieve your goals. Caleb will also help you determine if your situation warrants needing to work with a financial planner or if you're on track doing it by yourself. Head to advancedpracticeplanning.com/FI to grab your free consultation time slot. These consultations are capped each week to keep turnaround fast. That's advancedpracticeplanning.com/FI.
Advanced Practice Planning LLC is a registered investment advisor in Montana and Pennsylvania. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Advanced Practice Planning LLC and its representatives are properly registered or exempt from registration. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. This advertisement is for informational purposes only and does not constitute individualized advice or a guarantee that you will achieve a desired result. All topics discussed in this podcast are the opinion of the podcast host and not of Advanced Practice Planning LLC or its advisors.
And I think it's not, you're not paying in the hopes that you use it. You're paying in the hopes that you never have to use it. But if you do, that it's there, which is true for car insurance. Like I'm not driving to pick up my kids from school hoping that I get to use my car insurance either, right? Like we're hoping not to leverage that, like any type of insurance.
Exactly.
So if someone is thinking about side hustling, which is something that a lot of clinicians are doing, whether it's a PRN position, opening up your own practice, doing something that you're not necessarily, like I have an entire business that is not based on me practicing medicine, right? It's giving advice, it's doing other things. What type of insurance does that person need to be aware of? Clearly, if they're, practicing, they need medical malpractice, but what other types of insurance coverage should we be thinking about when it comes to those side gigs or side hustles?
Yeah. So especially if you're starting a new venture, I think the first step, and this goes to the initial point that you made, make sure you get confirmation of coverage with your name in it from whoever that employer is, right? Because if you eventually take your side hustle into like a major, from a sole corp to hiring a couple people to, now I'm full in 2 feet and you're leaving the other one. What we've seen is PAs leave companies to start something new to find out years of exposure, as in like work for a prior entity. And some of these were like $1 billion entities, go out of business and go insolvent and have zero coverage in the future, which means you could get a subpoena 3 years after you start your new business about something you did in a surgical, an ASC, 5 years ago. And now you're dealing with the subpoena and you've got to go out of pocket to get an attorney to defend you and then kind of figure that out. So first step, I would say, like if you're starting new ventures, is just getting an annual cadence of getting proof of coverage from the beginning of your career. Getting an annual cadence. It's just a certificate of insurance. It's 1 page. It shouldn't be hard to get it. That's number one. When you shift into a side hustle, there's different insurance policies you can get. We've got one that we've kind of crafted specifically for PAs because it's something like 13% of PAs have second and third work opportunities that they do on the PRN, locum tenens, and all that stuff. We call it a moonlighting policy, and what it does is it's a highly, I guess, reduced rate to only cover you for a small number of hours per week outside of your primary employer. So it basically excludes your primary employer and just covers the side hustle. So that's usually like a nicely reduced policy for med mal still. That's in the med mal side. If you're doing something like this, there is podcast coverage. You want to make sure you've got tons of coverage for any claims being made in the podcast, people saying something, defamation, things of that nature, right? So you want usually like you really need like a business owner policy or a BOP, they call it. If you're mobile and you're using your car for business, that turns into commercial auto. Cyber insurance is just, everybody needs to get cyber insurance. It's actually people on personal lines, as in like your house and auto, starting to get cyber insurance. That's becoming more and more typical. So that's like another one. Healthcare is the largest area of cyber breach, outside of education. So you really have a ton of risk on that. That's another one. If you have employees, you've got workers' compensation. You can be penalized by states. Certain states fine you if you don't have workers' comp. So you start this whole business and you feel great about it, and then the state says, "Where's your workers' comp?" And then you get penalized for not having it. Or you have 2 people listed, but you had 10 that you hired for your clinic. The disparity is a problem sometimes. So there's a bunch of different little policies that you can get. One thing I think is like kind of like a cool, I would say for a business owner and just for professionals, just like a really ace in the hole, is 2 things to think about. Is key person insurance is a great life insurance policy in essence. And especially if you have a partner that you go into business with, because you can make it part of your buyout agreements to leverage if somebody passes. You can use the key person insurance typically to kind of buy out your partner, and make that part of your like building up of your operation. But another thing about that's nice from like a family standpoint, I have a family, you have a family, is if something, God forbid, happens to you, you can usually, if you already have a life insurance policy, you get a key person for your business, but you can usually ask for an additional, personal life insurance policy too. So you can, in essence, like add another layer of life insurance for your family. That's a big one. And then disability is just, if you have like voice note issues, you can't really do the podcast, right? So you need to be aware of that. Like a typical disability policy will go off of, what you get paid and all that type of good stuff. But if you're a surgeon, anybody that sells disability insurance usually uses the surgeon thing. Example, as in like if you hurt your hands, you can't do surgery anymore. And that's quite different from, maybe doing primary care. So there's just like a handful of things like that I would always kind of keep in mind.
Yeah. And just like anything, like just like in medicine, when we want someone's opinion, we order a consult. So like find a trusted, person that you can sort of review your situation, review your needs, and get some recommendations. Is that how you guys do it? If someone, comes in, from hearing about it on the show, they get to consult with someone, and how does that typically go?
Yeah. So we handle, we've worked with millions of clients over the years. And we work with large scale businesses and then sole proprietors and then just people graduating from school too. Everything in between, students as well. But yeah, so what we do is we try to make ourselves like very simple to deal with on our side, as in you can get everything you want done online, but we also have a chat that kind of kicks in and you can ask to talk to live agents during working hours. We also have our top folks that work with PAs and business entities and other professionals. You can actually just book time with them for a phone call or a video. And you just book that time and you can just ask them any questions you have.
Yeah. And this is such an important reminder to just double check your personal and professional coverages. Like just pull them out, take a look, make sure they're up to date. They're still accurate. You still have the enough coverage that's going to cover you in terms of like life insurance, disability. And we can just never be too sure that we're having these coverages in place to protect ourselves and also to take care of our families. So thanks, Will, for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Okay. Very welcome, Tracy. Thank you so much.
No one wants to get named in a lawsuit. But if you do, you want to make sure that you had already in place appropriate malpractice coverage, that you yourself are covered in addition to whatever your employer is fostering coverage-wise. So make it a habit to know what your employer has in terms of coverage and make sure that you personally, professionally, and in a business, if you own or operate one, have the appropriate coverage. I know that insurance is not the most exciting topic to talk about, but making sure that you are covered is, in fact, your responsibility. Thank you, as always, for joining us for another episode of The PA is In. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations. You've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.